Hi, so here's the wonderful panel. And I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in the order you are on my screen. So Laura, why don't you go first?
Hello, everyone. Good morning from where I am. I'm here from Mexico City. I'm Laura Bright. I am a former corporate researcher who's also done full service and now likes doing the independent because I like to dig into the harder questions. And I guess that's all you need to know.
Great. And Viv?
Hey guys, so I'm here in actually in a lounge in New York City. San Francisco is home a little bit, and Austin is also a little home. And I'm the founder of QuestionPro, and looking forward to this discussion.
Thanks. And our final panel member, Priscilla.
I am Priscilla McKinney, joining you today right off of Route 66, so in the heart of the U.S. I am the CEO of Little Bird Marketing. We refer to ourselves as a sleep improvement agency. So for those busy owners who need to actually quit worrying about how they're going to get B2B social influence and lead generation, we take care of those issues, specializing in market research. So really happy to be here. And I see Ray all over the world. It's interesting finally to see him in Zoom.
So great to have you all with us. And we're actually going to start with Priscilla, because what's going to happen is each of us have brought a topic along to show and tell, and then we're going to be discussing that topic. So Priscilla, introduce your topic for us.
Yeah, so this topic is near and dear to my heart. You know, it's something I believe in so strongly that I am right on the very end of writing this book. So hopefully you'll see it next year. But regardless of the book, to me, it has a lot to do with the way I approach business and the way I think we could open up a much bigger dialogue about what is a new way forward for companies, and especially, looking very, very focally at B2B. Like, how do we actually operate not only in B2B, but also market research. And my book is titled Collaboration is the New Competition. And I won't go into specifics necessarily. Let's just completely take it outside of the book. But what is this about, and why am I so passionate about talking to my colleagues in this way? I really do believe that, there's constantly this push in business, work harder, work smarter, innovate, network, all these other kinds of things. And it's not that necessarily any of those things are bad. But I really believe that there's a new way to go forward. Honestly, with COVID, I think that we finally have some believers. We finally have some takers who are willing to say they got jostled enough that they are willing to say that their paradigm that they use to view business needs to shift. And I really believe that it's not collaboration for some kind of a kumbaya effect, or collaboration because it check marks maybe some DEI initiative or whatever the reason why people might collaborate, build morale, all these other things. I truly believe that if you do not have the skills and a proper framework for collaboration going forward, you are going to be left behind in business. And so for me, it's not about working harder, working smarter, or anything like that. It's about seeing a new pattern. It's about seeing business a little bit differently and understanding what's possible. And so kind of one small caveat of one thing that we can go down the rabbit hole a bit, and is my love, it's digital marketing. And in digital marketing anymore, you can't just go it alone. And people think, I'm not saying that because, it's better to go with people. I mean, it is nearly impossible to go it alone in digital marketing. The internet is so noisy, right? What once upon a time, those people who remember, back when websites were starting, there was that mentality of if you build it, they'll come. And people finally got on the pattern and the understanding that you can't just build a website and people come to it. That's just like, it's not that interesting. It's a business card. It's a cost of doing business. But what is that next step? So now when you look at, digital marketing, and it is so easy to get online. It is so easy to write messages. But the reality is that you are one in a sea of a billion messages. And so if you want to go it alone, that is a very different foray into business then understanding how to begin to collaborate and how to actually bring the right partners together. And one thing I'd love for us to discuss a little bit is sometimes the right partner to bring with you might surprise you. Sometimes the right partner to collaborate with may be your competitor. And it may not be, but it is about really rethinking the structure that we use to look at business and say, instead of this kind of Americana, good old go do it all by yourself and, little white snake, I could probably have done that as my intro music, mentality. How can I do this together in a way that is meaningful, but not, like I said, kumbaya, where it is really about profitability?
So could you give us an example of maybe outside the research world of where you see this, and then maybe one inside?
Oh, yeah. Oh, this is so interesting. I just saw one the other day that I was like, oh, I got to put this in my book if I can possibly get it in. This whole new framework is about bringing more people to the table, like not just a win-win, but how can I get a win-win-win-win-win, right? And so I was out shopping, kind of high-end, area in Chicago, go into the store, make my purchase. And they had a resident artist there. I mean, I'm buying clothing, right? And then when I went and, made my purchase, folded up, put it in a bag, I'm leaving. I'm like, wow, what a beautiful bag. And then I read the fine print. They have partnered with artists who basically need, if you will, a canvas for their work. And so if you were to say, well, here's my company, I just need to buy bags. Well, who else needs to, who else needs something that could be your bag? And so to say, look, here's an artist over here. They have a need to get exposure. We have a need to make our bag stand out and look beautiful. And, and the customer wants to feel like there's some, that they're doing something more than just shopping for a commodity. So I've got 3 different needs, and everybody has, I would say kind of an itchy back. Could we scratch all 3 of them with doing something very interesting and innovative and do some kind of collaboration? I'm like, I see the patterns of it, and I was like, there you go. And how could you broaden this out even bigger for a huge win? So that was outside of the market research. I've used the one inside market research. Sarah Kotler really led the charge during COVID for hashtag face-to-face MRX. And she basically said, look, face-to-face market research is going to take a big hit. This is COVID. We can't be together. And how do we actually, as an industry and as that niche within the industry, how do we work together? And that was, very insightful of her to call together a lot of those leaders. And I was so glad to be a part of that face-to-face MRX, push. And it really was a swell of interest, and it brought even competitors to the table for the good of the entire industry. So to me, that's my favorite MRX, example.
Fantastic. Laura, Viv, do you want to chip in with thoughts?
Go ahead, Laura.
Okay. It's hard to not agree with collaboration as being really important. I mean, I'm not going to put out that challenge, but when I think about it, I guess one of the things that has me thinking a lot lately is this phrase that I hear y'all in the US say all the time about IC, individual contributor. It's not a phrase we use here, but it boggles my mind because that is so distant from collaboration to talk about the individual. And yes, we all have something we contribute, but to me, collaboration with your other team, with supplier team, with whoever you're working with, it's always a team thing. And so I find it fascinating, Priscilla, that while you're talking about collaboration, and I see that as, and other people are talking about, I'm an individual contributor. And maybe it's because we don't use that phrase here that I miss something, but it stumps me.
Yeah, I think one interesting thing about it, Laura, and it's a really, really key piece, is what do we mean by collaboration? Because just because people are working together doesn't mean it really is actual collaboration.
Mhm.
And so, you can look no further than if anybody has a fifth grader where, people make them work together for a science project. And what happens in that kind of a situation is you've got the one kid who does all the work and the other ones goof around, right? But the teacher feels they're doing something right because they're getting people to collaborate. And so I would just like to say that, do not mistake people working together or even people working next to each other as actual collaboration. I think there's a real definition of what I would consider collaboration. And one of the things that you talk about, in terms of like teams getting things done and whatnot, I really caution people about the equity and the parity of the people that you bring into a collaboration. Because often you can have people at a table and, you bring them together. Really, people are checking off a box that they did it together. And yet the people who really are in authority are getting their will executed, right? And so there isn't really a sense of, true parity in the room where someone who is going to have to live with the consequences of the decision actually is being included in the decision-making process itself. And so, I really think it's about us, to your point, correcting what we mean by the word collaboration. So I just don't want to get involved anymore. People say, let's all get together and let's figure it out. And I'm like, oh my God, no, I do not want to do that, because there aren't any rules there. And I'm like, oh, good. Another thing that I can come in and solve, but you all can get credit for it, And it's not, to me, just, oh, I don't want to do the work for someone else. It's not about me just being selfish with my time. It's about those types of setups do not produce really wins. They might, they'll get a win for somebody and they might get a win-win, but they're not going to go any further if there isn't true collaboration. And the parity and equity is one issue. And I think another sign for me about whether or not we're collaborating really has to do with just following some of the ground rules, whose agendas are actually really on the table. And so, but I talk a lot with people about there are only certain people I will collaborate, certain teams I will collaborate with, because when people hide agendas, you never really collaborate. And so it's very hard to find people who are willing to put, I'm not talking about trade secrets on the table, but really to put their agendas on the table. That is difficult to find. But once you do, I think you really can collaborate.
So we're running a little short of time, but Viv, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, surely. So I think this reminds me of kind of the saying that if you want to go far, you got to go together. If you want to go fast, you can go do it alone. In the business context, I think we are pushing a little bit more towards a good example, especially in research. We're talking to these guys from NEC who come up with a new algorithm and they want to commercialize it using us. So they came with the algorithm, although we are the data collection business. We don't come up with the algorithm, they come up with the algorithm realistically. And normally I would have said like, we're not invented here. That would have been my default reaction. But like now it's like, look, we want to go far. We want to build a big business. We need to create an ecosystem. We need to work with somebody else who's created an algorithm. Not everything is created at QuestionPro realistically. And even the data systems, we are helping a lot of data and systems collect data, and not all the algorithms are obviously can be baked in. And so that's an example of collaboration. I think that is that's not direct competition, but definitely like a couple of years ago I would have thought about it completely differently. And now we kind of like if we want to go further, we need to create ecosystems. So another way of describing collaboration is talk about ecosystems. That's another kind of nomenclature that we can use.
Excellent. Okay, well, thanks for everybody. Please do have a look in the chat. We've got lots of nice comments there. I don't think any that are specifically questions because they're like building what is already there. Several people thinking back to their high school projects, and at least one person who wants to know the name of the store. We can come like, all right, yes, we've got that in already. So we're going to hand over to Viv now, who's going to bring us a quite different topic. So Viv, over to you.
Absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about what I call insights repositories and knowledge graphs. So I think the genesis that I'm trying to kind of approach is that obviously a lot of people do a ton of research around their business, around their constructs, around decision making, around customer satisfaction. But typically, a research team, this data is in either the head of a chief research officer / chief insights officer, or in a bunch of PowerPoint decks that has been accumulating dust over the last however number of years, realistically. And my background is obviously in software and technology, and I kind of did a parallel analysis and said we would never build software without a source code repository, straight up. So we build on top of things, really, right? So if you think about it, there's not a single software engineer on the planet that would start out writing software without having access to a repository. And I think the same kind of underlying thesis applies for research, where you say, like, well, we're going to do some research, we're going to find something, we're going to make some recommendations. And the next research has to be built on the previous research, and then the one is built on the previous research. So there's no continuity between, at least it seems like that. And not only it seems like that, I've talked to a bunch of customers. It seems like there's no continuity or at least structured way of kind of building things on top of each other, as opposed to kind of let's just do this research, and then 3 months later or 4 months later, like, what do we do again about that? And then a year later, like, well, the head of research got fired or quit, and so we lost pretty much all the historical data, or kind of at least the knowledge associated with it. So to me, that's kind of a structural problem because of the lack of kind of organized models for capturing insights. I'm not talking about data. There's lots of tools for capturing data across systems. There are data lakes, there's Snowflake, there's all kinds of kind of data repositories. But I think we need to kind of start thinking about beyond data repositories. I mean, there's obviously all the data is in one giant system, and every data goes into the same system. But that still doesn't help in terms of decision-making process. If just data help with decision-making process, and that's why researchers are there. They look at data and create insights. But the insights also need to be stored and structured and organized, and taxonomy has to be there around it so that previous insights can be used. And I think it's an obvious economic kind of argument where you say, like, look, are we doing research for the sake of doing research? Are we doing research to solve a problem? And have we solved this problem? Or have we solved a similar problem, or contextually there's something that we know about. So to me, like, that's a gap in the structural model that typically people use, and I think that's something that I think is going to get solved in the next 3 to 5 years, realistically, one way or the other, whether it's through technology, a series of tools and services, and change in process and methodology. That's gonna, I think that has a direct impact. And I see very similar argument would be like, you won't start a company without a CRM platform, right? Let's say you're hiring 2 sales guys. Yes, maybe you give them an Excel spreadsheet, but we used to do that 5 years ago, really, right? I mean, I don't know of a single company that gets started without a CRM platform, without systems and tools and technology that kind of make sure that we build. Can we run a company out of a CRM, out of spreadsheet? Yeah, maybe, but why should we? It's not smart, right? Like HubSpot, like email marketing platform. So would you start a company just without an email marketing platform, without a sales platform? Same argument I think applies when you start an insights team, and there's got to be a structured, organized way of collecting all the insights and repeatably kind of organizing that. So that's kind of my spiel around, that's what I mean by knowledge graphs, is like, creating a knowledge graph within an organization, and the repository kind of powers that knowledge graph. That's at least my thought process.
So, Priscilla, you look as though you've got a thought.
I do. I have a really good question for you. So you talk about, I like that word taxonomy. If we could unpack that just a minute. It's so cool thinking about, what the business applications are for when people really have a repository and really can search and build on knowledge, even knowledge that they did not do firsthand. But what would you say we should be doing about some of that, some of that verbiage. So, you know, for example, I know Michelle Ronson talks a lot about the UX Lex. Like, so we start calling things differently. You know, as market research, we are constantly trying to make it sexier, right? So people start using words. Now it's UX research, you know, that what's qualitative, and, you know, people start calling things different things. So tell me a little bit about what you think the way forward is with that taxonomy, and how people refer to different types of projects and methodologies and trends and things like that, and especially globally, they call it something different. You know, we all work globally. You know, they'll call it something different in the UK. They'll call it something different in APAC, and then we refer to it this way in the US. Even market research is not usually, you know, called market research around the globe. So in terms of that taxonomy, what do you think the direction is about understanding how we use a lexicon around this?
Yeah, my thought process around that is really the taxonomy and the lexicon is really oriented towards the business, really. Fundamentally, that's what we are trying to solve, really, like either a business problem or increased revenue, decreased churn, any number of different things. So it's really around the business, really, right? If you ask me what's a taxonomy for a SaaS company like QuestionPro, like, okay, we look at customers, we look at enterprise customers versus commercial customers. That's the segmentation that we do, for example. So whether we do UX for enterprise customers, UX for commercial customers, UX for SMB. So our taxonomy from a customer perspective, we have, you know, middle market, SMB, and enterprise. So let's, you know, just take that as an example. So I don't care whether we do UX or customer satisfaction or any of these things. They all anchor against, you know, these three elements. That's what we base economic decisions on. Our economic decisions based on what is our churn rate in each of these, say, three segments? How do we decrease churn, increase margins, blah 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 blah, right? So it's very important to get the taxonomy. You're right, absolutely. That in the sense that it's very important to get the taxonomy and everybody kind of anchored to the business, and then everything else, whether you're doing UX versus customer sat versus market research versus any number of different things that we're doing, they all kind of feed into that system, or at least the verbiage, the lexicon is anchored around the business, and the business defines, you know, and everybody kind of knows that. Anybody in the company knows like what the internal kind of lexicon is, what we care about, what we don't care about, what works, what doesn't, and then all the other functions that support the business also anchor against the same lexicon, and feed into that system. So that is my thought.
I just have to say, I love that, because I do think there is a huge conversation to be had here about market research truly serving the business decisions, and us not getting completely tripped up on, we want to call it this. You know, we want to really serve, you know, business decisions with big impact. This is exactly the conversation I think we need to have, Viv.
So Laura, do you have anything you want to chip in at the moment?
Yeah, I just have to say that from my past experience on the client side, what I found fascinating is that when people wanted to go find all these things that Viv wants to put in a repository, they didn't really know what they were looking for. It was kind of a go fish expedition. And there are people that say the more time they spend immersing themselves in all the findings we have, the better. And I was like, yeah, but we need somebody to steer them. Like, let's have a conversation. Let's try and diagnose what's going on. What are you looking for? With these repositories, now you can look at patterns. You can see who's a big user. You can go have a conversation with them. And I wish I'd had this a long time ago.
Yeah, that's the one other quick thing that has come up in my research, or obviously we're doing some amount of intelligent research over here. Like, people are looking for people who are looking for research also, right? It's very, today, like, you don't even know who within an organization is truly passionate about it. And you could find somebody in customer service who's truly passionate about trying to find out, like, how you know, segmentation, for example, right? And it is not, I feel at least, it's not democratized enough. Today, all the intelligent information we are producing, it's not democratized even within the organization. Forget about outside the organization. It probably doesn't make sense to, you know, share it outside the organization. But even within an organization, there are a lot of line level folks who can make decisions. And in my mind, at least, a lot of investments goes into, you know, doing research, but it has to be democratized internally to make sure that the ROI on the research is there, right? So so it can be actually used by folks across the entire spectrum. So that's also an important element in terms of the democratizing the knowledge base, and democratizing the content that is being produced.
I mean, feel from my own experience that it's going to require quite a lot of AI to put the coding together, because a few of you are old enough to remember the semantic web, which was going to come through and all the data was going to be self-explaining. Well, you're all, three of you, too young to remember one of the terms when I remember when I was at university, which we talked about ROM, read-only memory, which is where you'd put the operating system or something like that. But we also used to talk about WOM, W-O-M, write-only memory. You put it in. Filing cabinets were mostly write-only memory. You put stuff in filing cabinets, but you didn't take it out nearly as much. And humans are unreliable. If we say, we want you to annotate it and tag it and code it when you put it in the database so other people can use it. If you turn that around and we use the smart machines to do that tagging and coding, and all the humans have to do is say, oh, that's a bad piece of coding. That's a job we're much better at. So I think this is an idea of which is just at the right time, because now we're getting those smarts which we can use.
Great time to talk about ChatGPT.
Well, I'm just going to give you one more minute, because there will be some people in the audience who have not seen it, and they should, because it will blow them away.
Yeah, I mean, no. I mean, I'm just kind of being facetious, but yeah, I mean, you're right, Ray. Like, I think the innovation has to happen both on the kind of the data collection, repository modeling, as well as access to the repository, like ease of access to the repository, right? That's been the kind of the stumbling block over here. So there are different models that can be put together, and obviously we're scratching the surface with a lot of AI in terms of what can be searched for. Within the repository, how to present the data, what can be searched, what cannot be searched. So I think that's an interesting. Obviously, the ChatGPT is kind of like in current context, but that's fine.
And just keep pushing it a little bit further. So you have the debrief, the agency, the consultants come up, they present it to the C-suite. The C-suite asks questions. All of that now can be transcripted, analyzed, and put in, because that is where the knowledge is. I like the thing that you started with, Viv, which is it's not really about the data. Exactly. Yeah. When we look at a great mosaic, we don't say, there's a lot more blue glass there than red glass. We're looking at the picture. So thanks for bringing that, Viv. We're going to move over to Laura now. What have you got for us, Laura?
Okay, what I wanted to talk about is an opportunity that I see to do better than we are, and there are people doing it. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but it feels to me like there's been a lot of investment in res tech, in platforms, in software, in being able to do faster and cheaper the collection and the management of data. And from everything that I'm seeing, it's only going to accelerate as we go forward. I don't think we've gotten to the holy grail and we're just going to sit here now with these tools. I think they're going to keep on going. But what I don't see us putting the same energy and effort into is the people factor that builds on that. Those aha moments, that opportunity delight, something more customizable, not necessarily scalable. Someone's looking at it and thinking, not what's important in this data, but how does this data, whatever type it is, help my client with the business situation. And that is someone I know calls it high touch. It can be the personal version of Post-its, because I love Post-its all over everything. It's like a kaleidoscope, Ray. You were talking about colors and a mosaic and too much blue. If you think that we as people, let's say we have 3 core values, blue, red, and yellow. And in a kaleidoscope, you can move those around and shift, and there's multiple facets of what we project. Well, we as researchers need to be able to read the people in the room, the situation, and also reflect different aspects of our data. So our data can also go in a kaleidoscope. And if there isn't anything low tech like a kaleidoscope, I don't know, because they're ancient. But there are different facets in there that we need to highlight, and that requires knowing and dialoguing and understanding and knowing what to leverage. And I feel like we don't do enough of this. Now, not all projects need it, but when it's needed, we don't really have the skill set. We don't talk about it. I don't know who's helping people up their skill level on this, but I feel like all those more unique things that we add. I mean, a platform will deliver the same thing to everybody. How are you going to delight your client more because of either what you put in or what you take out?
Well, in terms of timing, it couldn't be better, because just as you were starting to speak, Laura, John Bird was typing in, let's not forget the importance of humans. So you spoke right to that. Priscilla, what do you think about humans?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you right now who is upping the game for that. I'll give a shout out and put a link in there to Women in Research has the Wire Accelerate program. And I got to say, why is it that many market researchers cannot get up at that table and give that kaleidoscope and complete view? I do believe that there is something sorely lacking in the market research world of truly having enough business prowess. Do they really understand what the business is operating on? I mean, things as simple as, a P&L, even Viv, kind of gave us like, look, these are the business things. They're looking at churn, they're looking at, and just going through the kinds of the ways that business measures success and the way that businesses, make decisions. And so I think there's a piece of the puzzle that's missing, why more market researchers can't have a bigger impact in that room, showing the bigger picture, knowing what to leverage. And like I said, a shout out to Wire for creating Women in Research Accelerate program. It's basically trying to teach skills that aren't market research skills. It's like, let's just start with some real business skills and make sure that these are business professionals who also happen to be experts in market research. So I'll definitely put there, it's a very inexpensive program with lots of scholarships and of course, so much else with Women in Research is free. That's a very small, I think, $500 investment into your people to really help them see outside of sometimes that myopic view of market research and really help those quality people understand the business realities in order to speak into them well.
Viv.
Yeah, so I think that's super fascinating. I think I kind of think about this, especially in the context of market research, is methodology versus impact, right? If you look at a lot of conversations go around methodology and not enough conversations go around impact. And that's what Laura's talking about, like, okay, where do you get the humans being? And humans need to kind of look at the impact analysis of it, right? What does that really impact? So, and recommendations and impact. So I think that's where kind of, effectively research is helping make better decisions. That's a very key element, is making better decisions, not just research, really. Research is a tool to make better decisions. Same as marketing. Really. Marketing is not for marketing's sake. Marketing is to further a particular goal. Same way research is to further a particular goal. And that goal is defined by the leadership team within an organization. Like, oh, we need to drive revenue, drive EBITDA, drive whatever it is, really. There are only 5 or 6 financial goals. Now, that's the economic argument. That's for, for-profit organizations, really, right? The for-profit organizations, by definition, exist for a profit, really. So, and so you have to have a clear kind of line of sight into what is it that you're trying to move. And obviously, as the company goes bigger, that line of sight becomes harder and more complex in an organization. And so kind of I think, humans are the kind of the last mile to impact from that perspective. You have a lot of data, a lot of insights, but the impact analysis is what I think, frankly, everybody's looking for to make that to make the change and improve or accelerate or whatever it is, accelerate that metric that they're trying to achieve.
I would agree with you about the last mile being a really important human one, but also I would jump to the other end, because you get this famous story. You go out to the parking lot outside the restaurant and there's a guy bending over looking for something under the lamp in the corner. And you say, what are you looking for? I've lost my keys. Did you lose them here? No, but this is where the light is. And we do sometimes see people focusing on what data do I have, as opposed to what is my problem. And so therefore, what do I need? or what can then be a proxy for it? How do I blend what I've got with what I can gather? And I think those sorts of thinking, but I think we have to give people more time, because I'm going to come into one of my bugbears now. So many research companies are hiring really junior staff on really low salaries, and they're trying to get them to compete against platforms by working really, really hard without training these people. And we saw this with the steam drivers and when they were building the railroads. You cannot get humans to work harder than machines, because machines just get better. And we've got to give people time to learn business, and we've got to get people time to learn people, because business is only part of that process. And so we just need more time, and companies just need to rethink how they're doing that.
Yeah, and sadly, I think that, sorry, people that love their data viz, but I think data visualization and infographics made it easy to put a pretty presentation forward of a whole bunch of information. But I find that like playing Where's Waldo? Like, what on here do I actually need? It's everything we learn slapped down, instead of these are the 3 key elements that we need to think deeper on and go further with, or change or deeper commit. But I don't like Where's Waldo. I think we're missing our chance to be impactful. And that's what we're trying to do, is be impactful.
So I mean, quite often when I'm working with teams in a training role, what I will do is they will come along with a deck of 30 or 40 slides, and I say, that's fine. Pick the 5 you're going to present.
Oh, yeah.
You've got a completely free choice. Just pick 5 and you're going to present that 5. Because in your early days, you often have to generate more stuff to get to it. Hopefully, as we get older, we can actually get closer to the right thing the first time. But yeah, in the early days, you do need to generate a lot of stuff, then narrow down to it.
And I think we report an awful lot for the auditors, and maybe that is a real requirement, and I'm not saying to ignore them, but separate and apart, like that doesn't have to be the discussion point. There shouldn't be any big reveal in a meeting. That should have already been discussed. But also, we don't need to go through everything we collected to prove our value. We want to talk about what makes a difference. Again, back to impact, mindfulness on why are we here? Why are we trying to do this?
Yeah, and just looking at the conversation there in the web chat, a lot of this has been about the difference in the amount of training we were given and the amount of training people our age are giving. Another example of the drawbridge being pulled up, I think. Any final comments on this one before we move to the next one?
No, I love the idea. Ray, I love the idea of like business training. I think that's, anybody joining, doing research, like, do you understand the business, first of all? Do you know why we make money, where we make money, who gives us money? A lot of times, a lot of people don't know the answer to that question. So if that's not, if you can't figure that out, or if you don't know the answer to that question, then it's kind of pointless doing the rest of the work. Is generally like, is your analogy is like, yeah, there's the light, so therefore I'm doing it. But, well, that's not the real problem to begin with. So yeah,
absolutely. Okay, so we're going to move to the final topic. Unless we get any curveballs coming in from the audience in a moment. And I'm going to talk about the metaverse. So I was a little bit cynical about the metaverse maybe 6 months ago. It's, how many situations can you sit there wearing virtual reality headsets? I can interview somebody while they're at work using the telephone. I can interview them at work using Zoom. I can interview them at work using an online text, or I can use a survey. I can't ask them to put a virtual reality kit on at the moment at work and for them to claim they're still working, nor if they're on the train. In Europe, we do a lot of our interviewing with people who are on trains logging in. I've got a feeling if you're on a British train and you've got a virtual reality headset, you'd find just about all of your kit gone by the time you get your suitcase will have been stolen, your bags and so on at the other end. So it's a brilliant thing, but I thought, how limited is it going to be? But actually, I've started listening to a lot of the people who are really involved in this, and they minimize virtual reality. in the metaverse. The first thing they jump to is extended media. So it's augmented media, it's everything you can add. They then jump very quickly from there to Web 3, not 3.0, please. The only one that has 0 was the 2. Web 3, which is just the next digital, interactive, personalized, scaled improvement. All of this stuff going on around us, HoloLens, conversational AI, we're coming back to ChatGPT. There's some fantastic stuff going on now. We are going to see some magnificent changes. At one end, there are going to be things like Hello Aura have now started running a couple of focus groups in the metaverse. That is going to be like super niche, and it's fantastic that somebody does that. But it's going to then pull back from there. And you'll hear people say, well, you can't sample through things like the metaverse and Roblox because only a minority there. But 100% of the users of that, so the people who are looking at Balenciaga shopping in the metaverse, are the people you want to interview about, is that the right shop in front? And should they really put children into children's toys into abusive stuff? They could have said no without research, if you all missed that Balenciaga story. Moving that way, but Microsoft HoloLens, augmented reality, all of this is coming through. And the real core of it for me is the personalized experience and the conversational AI. I think that is going to be a really interesting challenge on where things go next. I think it's going to tie in so well with pushing people to define the problem better. I think it's going to push really well in terms of making those repositories more useful. So if you think the metaverse is meta and it's virtual reality headsets, I think you're looking at a really tiny part of the whole process. If you simply say it's the next stage in the AI digital creation, and I saw this lovely phrase, some of you have probably seen it longer, the phygital, the physical and the digital blending, as opposed to saying, well, we'll do this, and then this is in real life, IRL over here, and here's the digital. No, much more blended. Thoughts, anyone?
I have a question, just a clarification. In what way do you see AI and this particular technology helping us frame the question better?
Oh, so instead of saying to somebody, hey, type your questions in here, it will actually say much more like, you want to do a satisfaction survey? What are you trying to find out? What's the business problem you've got? Pushing you along those sort of lines. And what sort of people do you think you are looking to sell this product to? And why do you think you're looking to sell? And what else would they do if they don't buy your product? So those questions that humans ask on a good day, that is really capable of being put into the AI system. So we end up choosing the right research. We end up looking for the right sort of information. And then all of that links through about how much data do we need? Because one of the things that's really strange if we talk about quant studies, and it's actually really strange if we talk about qual studies, we often make the decision, we need 8 groups. And sometimes after 2, you realize we need 2. But you don't. Cancel the others. We think we need 1,400 interviews, and you realize after 100 interviews, not one person liked it. So actually, stop would be in there. We put a bit more intelligence into that data collection system, and it will either change the question or it will pause the thing through. So that is where I see the conversational AI coming in the design process of better questions. And also, if we come back to Viv's point, and all of us who work on the research side, we've had this, sometimes people ask me to do a study and I'll say, I did that for one of your colleagues about 3 months ago. There's a report just down the corridor from you answering that. All of a sudden, you ask the conversational AI to design it, and they say, we've got the answer to that already. It's in the repository.
So I have a question for you,
Yeah.
Ray. Like, obviously, I think I have a disagreement in terms of the definition of metaverse, right? So you're defining metaverse as anything next gen, effectively, or anything beyond current.
I think that is what we should do.
Whereas conventionally, at least, metaverse is defined as kind of something that, something that's kind of independent of AI to some extent. We may use AI, but kind of like in general, kind of conversational AI is not necessarily kind of juxtaposed to the metaverse. The metaverse, from my understanding and what I've kind of understood it at least, is that it's kind of this, Roblox kind of maybe not always using a lens and kind of, but at least kind of like, a different environment. But as conversational, I am fully aligned with and fully like there's going to be lots of innovations that's going to come through the kind of the models around, do we need to run a focus group? Can a system run a focus group? Okay, it's pretty far-fetched, but it can a system run a focus group for you and kind of get some information from 3 people that is distilled and fairly interesting. Which is different in my mind, at least, than the metaverse, which is more at least marketed as a kind of like, the next version of gaming, for example, like, what mobile gaming did to kind of console gaming to PC gaming. And this is kind of like, the 4th generation of kind of gaming, realistically. At least that's kind of how I think about it.
That's where I was till a few months ago. Attended a few events, and everybody who was talking about delivering something from the metaverse slipped straight into Web3, and they started pulling in this whole next generation together. Yeah, metaverse as such is going to be mostly about gaming and porn.
Right, I forgot the porn stuff, but
yeah.
Good point.
But that is right, just at one end of the process. When you start talking to people who are working with the technologies of Web3 and the metaverse, what they're delivering is much better designed things. So buildings that are going to exist in the real world, being built in this blended virtual and real reality, checking things through there. There's a university in the UK, Ravensbourne, doing fantastic stuff in the design of fabrics. So you can look at the stuff in virtual reality to see how it's going to fall and fold, but you are making real products in the real world. So all of that is coming through. And when we listen to the metaverse, you kind of need to skim past the bits that you don't think are relevant at the moment. So if you're not a blockchain fan, me, then it's naturally not a core part of it. People who are blockchain fans will tell you that Web3 is all about blockchain, but somebody else who is HoloLens fan will tell you it's all about that. You don't need to listen to what it's all about. It's a lot of stuff. And we are going to go through it's not going to be as big as the 95 change when we went to the internet from paper, but it's going to be pretty big.
So I'm fascinated with this whole thing because I remember that 95 framework. And when I looked at websites and I was sort of like, okay, I don't get the point. It's like a magazine catalog, yellow pages ad, and it didn't do much. It wasn't really a representation of what we now know the internet is doing, and we're not done yet. It's going to keep on evolving. And so I guess like I'm glad people are working on this and thinking about it. But I'm still back to today, we got to make an impact on the business. And so please, somebody who's fascinated by this, keep working and bring me something. But for now, I want to focus on what's making a difference and delivering those business results. The other thing is, I think when we talk about internet, we mix that up with algorithms. And like when people talk about social media and, oh, I hate the internet and I spend too much time on the internet. Well, it's the algorithms that are driving what we see and where we go, not the internet itself. And so full circle back to lexicon and what we call things. So I don't know what the metaverse is and I don't know what it's going to do, but I'm curious and I'll keep watching it, but I'm not going to change my daily activities.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, humans have those same blinders too. So I think, when we talk about this going into the metaverse and actually, looking at applications for what needs to happen next in business, I think it's about, can we build something better that basically removes some of those blinders? Because the answer can't just be more humans and more time, because frankly, we don't have more humans and we don't have more time. And that's where Viv's coming from, saying there's a business question that needs to be done at the speed of business. And the speed of business and the speed of market research often are out of sync. And I think that's a major issue. And so if we can solve some of that with AI, metaverse, whatever it is, it's not, which way do we want to solve it? It's like we can sit over here and discuss humans or robots, or human robots, or robots built by humans, which, whatever it is, like that to me is such a separate conversation. I think the issue is that, business is happening at a much faster pace and these things are not keeping up.
Yeah. I'm going to give you a nice example of components that come together to make a metaverse sort of example, and it moves away from some of the research world as well. So for some time, we've had real-time displays where you can run experiments where you put the prices up, the availability, you change the order, and the customers in that fast food store, the customers in that railway station are exposed to it, they behave in a different way. We've got smart billboards where they look and count how many people's eyeballs are looking at the billboards and moving through now. And the smart billboards are also assessing what types of people are moving past. There are some scary things because there's some racial profiling going on, for example, in China with that sort of technology as well, which is kind of scary. But we can start to see, because that is, if you're walking past billboards, we think back to Minority Report, it's looking at you, it's changing the message, it's measuring the message, and it's not a sample because it's linked back to retail. You are in the metaverse. You might think you're walking through the mall, but actually by the time we've got that degree of pickup, and remember, we're monitoring your mobile phone. Your MAC address is picked up the moment you move into the mall. We know when you stop, where you move. All of that is metaverse, effectively. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is used for sales and it's used for marketing, but it's not sufficiently used for market research because we often get given a problem and go, is that a survey or a focus group discussion I should be thinking about? And actually, there's some really quite radically different ways of solving that problem.
Sounds good.
Oh, okay, quick shout. Anybody in the audience like to ask the talent that we have available or me a question? I mean, Janet's point about, do we want to know what people feel and think? I'm not sure how much I believe facial coding. It's one of the technology out there, but obviously that is one of the things that they use. However, I normally have this device on, which tells you all sorts of biometrics about me all the way through. And that can be picked up. So I can see more coming through that way.
There's a question in the Q&A. I think it's really for Viv. From an organizational perspective, who should be responsible for creating a repository? Does it require full-time attention to establish and to manage?
Yeah, I mean, if you take a look at a lot of people in the UX community, the UX research, not market research, but the UX research community have actually adopted that model. And there's a discipline called research ops that is being evolved, if you will, right? Which is you have, just like sales ops, I mean, I look the same parallel to if you have a large sales team, you have somebody who's managing sales operations realistically. The same really similar logic applies over here. Somebody's managing the repository, like quarterbacking it in terms of what gets in, when does it get in, how does it get democratized, so there's got to be a custodian of the repository. Every time you have some sort of a database / repository / whatever you want to call it, you need a custodian around that. They have ownership around it. So So going back to the question, my thinking would be like somebody in the research team, somebody designated within the research team owns the creation, curation, execution, and their KPIs are adoption, really, right? So every time you don't do research, it's actually a win for the repository. It's kind of like counter. To some extent, it's counter from a vendor perspective. It's counterintuitive, right? Obviously, you want to make more money by doing more research. Whereas for the company, like, okay, if we don't do a research, it's actually like we have the data, so we don't need to spend another 50 grand, 10 grand, whatever it is, to do it. So that would be the kind of KPIs that would make sense to say, like, hey, we'd not do this research because we have the data over here, so we save 10 grand or 10 grand, whatever it is, really.
So I'm going to pick up on a comment here in the chat from Usha. In terms of creating a repository, Viv, would you start by putting old information into it, or would you start by putting the new information?
No, I'd start by putting, I look at most of the teams as there's a gold mine. Typically, I look at that and say, like, look, you've done, even customers of ours, frankly, like, you've done, X number of surveys every month over the last, 36 months. That is a very large number usually. So it takes a little bit of work to kind of organize that. And maybe we don't have the AI to kind of like fully organize that, but it's not necessarily a Herculean task. It's a little bit of work, but I would recommend, what we are recommending is like, take all the data that you have, organize it, and use that as a baseline, and then move forward. Then you can have almost immediate ROI. Within 30 days, we can deliver ROI in terms of, hey, what are the research projects that we've already done, and we can organize it, and we can look at it, and we can find it in a reasonable way, as opposed to pure text. I mean, it's not that it's not being done. Like, you can put it in SharePoint and do a text search, really, but the text search is not very usable, not very feasible, and so that's why it's not being. My analysis, that's why it's not being used, because the first time somebody goes to use it, they search for something, they don't find anything, or they find too much of irrelevant conversation. So that almost negates. It's like pre-Google search. Think about how Google search was, we're old, so it's like exciting like us and all that stuff. There was pre-page rank, really. Page rank changed the game, right? Yeah. It was just text search. Page rank created a hierarchy within the content, really, right? Made it relevant. So I think for that to happen, so the content is there, but the hierarchy is not there, or the hierarchy modeling can be worked on.
Fantastic. So we've reached the top of the hour. People who got up very early in the morning, like Janet, are finding that they're now up to full speed, which is fantastic. So thank you, Laura. Thank you, Priscilla. Thank you, Viv, for coming along and sharing your thoughts. Thank you, everybody who was chatting away in the chat stream. That was fantastic. It makes life so much more challenging and interesting if we can see all of that going on there too. So thank you very much, and we will call that a day until the next time. Bye for now.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.